I'm Mark Halperin.
And I'm Jon Heilemann. And with all due respect to Bill Kristol's political judgment, it looks like David French may have a little bit of work to do.
Who exactly is David French?
So, who is David French?
Who the heck is David French?
He is a strong...
Hello again from L.A. There's a lot happening out here in this golden state before the California primary, but we can hardly look up from our telephonic devices because today a presidential candidate went on a Twitter rant, posting a series of white-hot burns. And no, this time the burner in question was not Donald J. Trump, billionaire. It was Hillary R. Clinton, multimillionaire. In 8 tweets, Clinton flayed Trump over documents published in the New York Times and the Washington Post about a federal lawsuit against the for-profit school known as Trump University. Here's a sampling, hot off the boiler. First, Clinton warned that a New York Times article on this matter, quote, may cause nausea. She called the business practices that Trump engaged in with Trump University sleazy and fraudulent and wrote, quote, the Trump University con says a lot about Trump. If you can't trust him with your personal finances, how can we trust him with our country, end quote. These days, that counts as a presidential smackdown. Clinton continued her attacks in the flesh at a rally in Newark, New Jersey today with John Bon Jovi and Senator Cory Booker.
This is just more evidence that Donald Trump himself is a fraud. He is trying to scam America the way he scammed all those people at Trump U. It's important that we recognize what he has done because that's usually a pretty good indicator of what he will do.
So, Mark, Hillary Clinton clearly trying to make Trump University a big issue. My question for you is this just an issue we're going to be talking about now, or we're going to be forgotten by the fall, or can Clinton make this an issue that dogs Trump all the way to election day?
There are a lot of variables here. These are accusations. The for-profit college business is pretty dodgy across the board.
Yeah.
And Trump is facing some accusations that would be very serious for a normal candidate. He's shown an ability to rise above it. I think the big variable we haven't seen yet is victims, or people who claim to be victims, humanized in advertisements, on interviews. Who are the real human faces, not just on paper, but in flesh and blood and on video?
I think the reason why this could be a problem for Trump, first of all, you've got people who worked for Trump in these documents saying it's a scam, it's a con, using really kind of salty language about their own employer. It does, if the narrative that the Clinton
campaign... I'd say more
campaign,
spicy than salty, but...
Spicy and salty. Piquant. What the narrative is that they're trying to build about Donald Trump is that he's a con man who does not care about the real lives of real people and that he has profited at their expense. This will not be a dagger. This will not be the silver bullet that kills Donald Trump. But as part of a larger mosaic, if they can build that larger mosaic, it could be crippling to his campaign in the long run. Again, if it's sustained, and this is one piece of evidence of a larger bill of attainder.
And there are a lot of facts here that go to some of Trump's vulnerabilities in terms of using his name to make money for something that is more mirage than substance. I do think that Trump has a history of being able to use lawyers and delay tactics. Maybe he settles the case even though he says he won't. If he can make the legal part go away, the political part will hurt less. Although I'll say again, human victims are so important. You think about the Swift Boat Veterans for Truth. You think about some of the attacks against Mitt Romney. The things that stuck were in paid and earned media, real people. You can say all you want, real people were victims. You can read depositions.
You need the faces.
You need to see the people and what actually happened to them. But this is dangerous for Trump, there's no doubt.
It is dangerous.
Yeah. All right. In between the tweets today, the Clinton campaign also found time to send out a press release announcing that Bill Clinton is going to join his wife in California for the 5 days leading up to the primary here next Tuesday. Clinton herself had previously canceled some scheduled events in New Jersey, so she could also spend more time in California in the run-up to that critical contest here on Tuesday. This comes as a brand new NBC News Wall Street Journal Marist poll shows that Clinton holds a significant, statistically insignificant, narrow 2-point lead over Bernie Sanders here in the Golden State, well within the margin of error, of course. So, John, the Clinton campaign is clearly going here to try to win this state. The polls suggest it's up for grabs. There are people out here who think the poll underestimates Sanders' support. Are the Clintons coming in here to try to win this, to put it away, or are they more playing defense because they recognize that they're behind?
I think that they still think that they can win this state.
Yeah.
That's my sense. They still think they can win it. I think both campaigns internally, privately would say that the state's a toss-up. They both also know that in states where Bernie Sanders typically, where he spends a lot of time and is on the air for a while, that the pre-election polling tends to understate his support. And so the Clinton people are clearly nervous, and they're deploying the two assets that mean more to them than anything, advertising dollars and Bill Clinton.
If you look at the NBC poll, her support is in the two big areas here in Southern California, around Los Angeles, and around in the Bay Area. And if you have both Clintons here, they'll go other places in the state, but they can really try to swell the vote in those two places. And as well as Bernie Sanders is doing on the coast, inland, it's going to be hard for him to keep up 2 against 1 if the Clintons here, if it is as close as the NBC poll suggests.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And look, Bill, this is one of the places in the country here in Los Angeles where Bill Clinton, because of his charisma, because of his star power, because of the associations of the 90s, he was always Hollywood's candidate. People like Bill Clinton. He will get a lot of airtime here if they're willing to put him in front of cameras. They've not done much of that. They've sent him into places in small media markets.
He'll get on local
news. But I think he'll get on local news here, and he'll be able to get on the airwaves.
The thing that's setting up well for Hillary Clinton, the silver lining of the closeness of the races now, they'll split the delegates no matter what.
Yeah, that's right. It's not a delegate.
A win will be a win for her. A narrow win will really give her and her surrogates the ability to argue more forcefully starting next Wednesday for the good of the party. Must unify Bernie Sanders can get at. So now I think a full court press here, if she comes up with a win, which I think people are underestimating her chances here, this could be a decisive decision to send the big dog to the big state.
All right. The story that the Clinton campaign would very much like to go away, her emails, is not going away, at least not yet. Some testimony from a deposition involving Clinton's private email server has been released. While we're talking about the deposition of Cheryl Mills, Clinton's former chief of staff at the State Department and a member of Clinton's inner circle. In her testimony, Cheryl Mills said that advisors didn't really think very hard about the problems a private email server could cause, and that this was, quote, absolutely not about avoiding public record laws. Yesterday evening, Clinton gave phone interviews to MSNBC and CNN in which she repeated her campaign's defense, saying she regrets doing what she did, but she's moving forward and that voters don't seem to care very much and that they should weigh it against her whole career in public service. So, Mark, my question for you, we talked about this yesterday, about their slight shift in terms of how they were doing defense. Has it now, at this moment, has this round, again, we're going to get the FBI round a little later, is this round now in the rearview mirror, or is she still under siege?
I don't like the fact that they didn't cooperate with the investigation. I don't like the fact that they're still being fuzzy about what she's exactly sorry for. I don't like the cavalier attitude they continue to exhibit about the Freedom of Information Act as a watchdog of the public interest. Right. I will say, as a matter of pure politics, I think they're actually in pretty good shape. I think they have gotten through this. There's now the Trump University thing. There are a lot of other distractions. There's not much for people to seize on. And if the FBI doesn't charge her, and I still don't know quite what they'll charge her with, it is going to take a lot for Republicans to reignite this. Lots of damage has been done, but as a matter of daily trouble for her, questions and interviews, etc., I think they may have a chance to get through this.
There's a real lesson here for the Clinton campaign. I agree with most of what you just said. I think there's a real lesson for the campaign here, which is that they were really having trouble in this most recent round of this, dealing with the IG's report until they put Hillary Clinton in front of cameras or on the phone. They've been reluctant to do that in a lot of cases. She's not been nearly as available, obviously, as Donald Trump. And I think the main reason in which they've had some success now, and if they have now moved past it, that they've been able to, is the fact that she made herself more available, that she came out and did a round of TV interviews. She did the phone interviews yesterday. Look, even if you're not changing your position very much, even if you're giving unsatisfactory answers, your presence on the airwaves does a lot when you're a presumptive or near presumptive presidential nominee.
And to paraphrase Elton John, for Hillary Clinton in her campaign, sorry is now the easiest word. They say, we were sorry all the time about this.
Again, we still don't know exactly what they're sorry for.
Exactly. All right, coming up, forget everything you know about David French. That probably didn't take very long. Our French education class after this.
Oui, oui.
"24 hours after we broke the news here, lots of people are still talking about Bill Kristol's magical mystery independent candidate, the conservative writer and lawyer David French. What is Kristol up to? Can this man, David French, raise money? Could he make it into the presidential debates? Is this a ploy to try to keep anyone from getting 270 electoral votes? A lot of important questions to ask, but the first question a lot of people are asking is a more basic one. Who is David French?
We can expect to hear names, the same names, over and over again. Trump, Clinton, Sanders, and French. That's right, French.
David French, a name you may have never heard of.
Someone that many people may not have heard of, a guy named David French.
David French, the guy on the extreme left of your screen.
If you have no idea who that is, don't worry. You're not alone.
Don't know Mr. French.
I thank Mr. French for his service.
What does he offer up, Mr. French?
You met my friend, Mr. French, the other night.
So let's talk a little about David French. You've been tweeting like crazy about David French.
Zeroing in on David French, this man.
David French, not exactly a household name.
Who exactly is David French?
So, who is David French?
Who the heck is David French?
And what about David French?
We all know, love, and respect David French.
French tweeted last night, "I'm incredibly humbled by and grateful for the many expressions of support." We want to switch gears now and get to the flooding emergency that is taking place across Texas.
So you heard David French tweeted once last night, once today, kind of making fun of the notion that some people are writing him off, saying this has been basically a year of long shots. Lots of reaction on TV, mostly people expressing skepticism. Some conservatives on Twitter and social media have been supportive. So about 24 hours after the trial balloon went up in the air, what kind of altitude does the David French launch have?
Well, let's just not say it's like not soaring skyward with a rapid velocity.
No French mania.
Yeah, that's not happened. And obviously, a lot of people have gone so far as to say, well, the fact that David French is Bill Kristol's guy it signals the end of the Never Trump movement. I think we yesterday said what we would say today, which is that the odds of this guy, given his low name ID, the issues he'll have on money, on raising money, getting on all the ballots, or enough of the ballots to make a difference, the odds of him appreciably changing the contours of the race are small. But the key elements still remain. He's not presented himself in any way. And so this level of who he would have been true for anybody who wasn't a household name. The next question is going to be, if this guy does decide to run, when he stands up and makes an actual speech, gets on an actual television program, makes the pitch for his candidacy, is he compelling or not?
Yeah. I mean, a compelling speech, I think, is a big deal. Fundraising is obviously a big deal.
Right.
But he does need to be someone who the country could look at, or at least some parts of the country look at and say, yeah, that guy seems like he could be the president of the United States and a better president of the United States than the two unpopular front runners of the two major parties.
Right.
I think that given how ridiculously it was launched, broken by us, ridiculous, and the guy's tweeted twice but not done anything in public, no one's really spoken up in a prominent way in his behalf. I think given that, it's, in decent shape, but he's got a lot of work to do if he gets in this race to rev it up, and he's not done much.
He's going to have to be magic right out of the gate, I think.
Yeah.
And if
he's going to have to be the natural.
Right, if he's not magic right out of the gate, I think it's doomed. All right, Donald Trump's birthday is in 2 weeks. What do you get for the man who has everything? How about a super PAC? Yes, even Donald Trump, billionaire, might need a super PAC. Sheldon Adelson is reportedly in talks with political consultants to set up just such a pro-Trump super PAC. 2 of them already exist, such super PACs, that is, but wealthy donors have raised concerns about both of them. There's a lot of confusion on the Trump super PAC front. So, Mark, in a battle against Clinton, Donald Trump's going to need to raise a lot more money. Super PAC's going to be part of that. So given how imperative it is, why is the Trump campaign apparently having so much trouble getting its act together on this front?
Well, you start with the fact that the Trump campaign sends mixed signals about whether they even want a super PAC. Trump has disavowed super PACs. One of his advisors was quoted, though, in the last 24 hours saying Mr. Trump has a lot of support and he can't really stop people from supporting him. So that seemed to me to be a wink and a nod. A lot of the wealthy people, you saw this with the Cruz model, a lot of the wealthy people don't want to just go to a central fund and let managers of those funds decide how it's spent. They want to hire the consultants, and some of them want to be very specific about, are we doing advertising? Are we coordinating with down ballot races? What are we doing? So I think that without the campaign playing a very active role publicly, or as best I can tell privately, this thing continues to float in a way that is not helpful to his chances.
Right. In 2012, we had the first big super PAC election, right? You had Restore Our Future, pro-Romney super PAC. You had Karl Rove's Crossroads outfits, right? They knew the mind of the Romney campaign pretty well. And yet even they found effective coordination, not illegal coordination, but de facto coordination. Very difficult to pull off, and it was largely seen as a failure among a lot of donors who put a lot of money into those super PACs. If I'm a big Republican-rich donor, looking at Trump's unpredictability, looking at the mixed signals, knowing how hard it is to work effectively without actual coordination, I'd be really wary about this as just being a giant sink down which I could pour millions of dollars.
Yeah, I mean, they need to get this solved. There's so much on their to-do list: convention, Veep stakes, organization, hiring. They really need to get this fixed because the Clinton one moves on. I will say, however, that the Republicans' normal advantage in millionaires and billionaires writing big checks over the Democrats could kick in a big hurry if they could solve this. The Clinton effort is robust, but it is not overwhelming. All right, when we come back, we will speak to President Barack Obama's former top wordsmith. The speechwriter Jon Favreau of Los Angeles, California, joins us right here after this. Welcome back to Los Angeles. We're joined now 3,000 miles away by the Republican National Committee's chief strategist, communications guru, Sean Spicer, who joins us from RNC headquarters in the nation's capital. Sean, thanks for coming on. We want to talk to you about Hillary Clinton and her emails starting out and ask you this. The FBI investigation continues. What would you hope they would do? Specifically, what crime do you think Secretary Clinton might have committed?
Well, I don't know. I'm not an attorney. I think it's a good question, though. I think what we've seen from the IG report last week was that unequivocally she did break State Department rules. They did have done things to block the investigation, her and her top aides, and they knew what they were doing was wrong. And I think more importantly, Mark, instead of just the crime, I think it's the pattern. And what we've seen with Hillary Clinton is not someone who tells the truth, who has a set of rules for her that are separate from the rules that everyone else has to play by. And so, frankly, I think the bigger issue here isn't necessarily the underlying crimes that may or may not come of this, but this continued lack of honesty and forthrightness that the Clintons have this propensity to continue to tell.
In the IG's report, there are a lot of things singled out that've gotten attention. One is a mid-level official telling some lower-level officials that basically they should never again raise their concerns about her private server. Do you have reason to believe anything you've heard or any suspicion that you have that that person was acting on orders from above, or is it possible that was just a mid-level person basically saying, leave the secretary alone?
Of course, it's possible that it could have been exactly, that scenario as well. But I think, again, this isn't just one instance. It's a pattern. There is a pattern of Cheryl Mills trying to make sure that the security requirements that they were informed of weren't met. They knew the risks that were involved. It was brought to the secretary's attention at the time that the email, that there were problems. They flagged several times her use of the BlackBerry in the office. So on multiple occasions, there were warnings that the behavior that they were involved in was not up to the State Department standards, was not abiding by the rules that were set. And I think they were also made aware that there were potential opportunities to hack those emails and that there were vulnerabilities that existed under the system that they'd set up on the secret server. So they were aware of the rules. There's no question about it. Her top aides had signed forms that stated that they knew what they were dealing with, and yet they violated them. At some point, the buck has to stop at the top. And I think, again, this isn't a one-off small incident. This is an entire pattern. The second thing is that when you look at, we had to file not only several FOIAs, but sue the State Department to find out if the guy, Brian Pagliano, who set up the server, had any emails. The State Department reported back that the IT guy who was setting up her server, there are no record of any emails. So I don't know how the email guy has no email, but that just tells you, and that's the same guy, by the way, who's cut a deal with the FBI for immunity. So there clearly is something here worth following up on.
Sean, let me ask you two questions about your party's presumptive nominee. The first one relates to Trump University. There are a couple of really tough stories in the paper today, in the Washington Post and the New York Times, that detail the accusations against Trump University, some of them coming from former employees of Trump University in those court documents. Is there anything in those stories that you find troubling with respect to your nominee or your presumptive nominee?
Not at this point, John. Again, I think right now you've got an ongoing ongoing litigation, and so I'm not involved in that. I don't know all the facts, but nothing so far suggests that Mr. Trump was personally involved in this.
Right. So when you read those stories, though, with former employees of Trump University describing it as a scam and as basically saying they were kind of defrauding students of the university, when you see those words, those don't set off alarm bells for you politically?
Well, sure. I mean, I don't like those stories, if that's what you're asking me. No one in politics likes negative stories about a candidate that's on their side. So, of course, we don't go, hey, great, there's a story in the New York Times or the Post about this. But I think that the question becomes, they're involved in litigation right now. Is it a disgruntled former person? Is it someone who is, clearly they are not happy with something and they're suing? I don't think that generally elicits the most positive responses. But on the flip side, I've seen the stories where there have been thousands of students who have said that they had a great experience, that they rated it excellent. So it's always a balance. There's going to be plenty of people who have negative things to say.
Right. Let me ask you, the second question I was going to ask you is about Mr. Trump yesterday in his press conference, of course, attacked the media in a pretty thoroughgoing way and sometimes in a pretty personal and vituperative way, saying some pretty nasty things about some individual reporters. You're a communications professional and also a very pleasant man. Do you think it's wise, just as a matter of politics, do you think it's wise for Donald Trump to treat the Fourth Estate that way?
That's not necessarily my tactic, as you alluded to. But look, I don't think when you look at the level of success that he's had in politics, right? He had 16 candidates. Everyone said that he wasn't going to run, and then they said that he wasn't going to be able to. He couldn't beat these individuals. He emerged as the victor from all of them, largely, through earned media, through events and stages. So for me to give him advice and tell him what's right or wrong would seem a little foolish at this point. That being said, I think that there is the guy goes out, raises close to $6 million for veterans, and I think he was a little frustrated that instead of there being some, when someone goes out and does something very charitable or tries to do something, that there is a sense of applauding that individual for the effort on behalf of a good cause, which this was. I think Mr. Trump, and to some degree, largely rightly so, was upset that the level of scrutiny that's not necessarily applied to other things that when someone tries to do something of that nature come back. And so I understand his frustration, to be honest with you, that some of these individuals wanted to pick it apart about what date a check was cashed or whatever, instead of applauding the overall effort, which is something that, frankly, all Americans should be applauding, helping, our nation's veterans, those who have earned our respect and have served this country so ably.
Sean Spicer, Republican National Committee. Sean, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. The former Obama speechwriter, Jon Favreau, up next right here from Los Angeles after this.
Joining us now is the former chief speechwriter for President Obama, columnist for the Bill Simmons Project known as The Ringer, and the co-host of the Keeping It 1600 podcast. That would be Jon Favreau.
Hi, guys.
Or Favreau.
Thank you.
Not the director of Iron Man, right?
No.
You did not direct Iron Man.
I did not, as far as I know.
You do have a story up at this new Simmons podcast, right? That's right. That's like headlining, that's like front page.
New today.
New today. Talks about President Obama's role in the November election. Tell us what you think that's going to be, and how, I know you think it's going to be a good thing, because you generally think everything President Obama does.
I don't think it's going to be a bad thing.
But tell us, give us the contours of what your argument is.
Well, look, I mean, he's out there today in Elkhart, and this is sort of the start of it. But pretty soon, I think the one thing that Hillary hasn't had behind her is a united party. She hasn't been able to have, Obama, everyone else making the case for her. And once California's over, once the primary's over, she'll have the whole party behind her. And Obama, in particular, will be an asset because he is right now at a 52, 53% approval rating. When the incumbent president is at an approval rating like that, it usually helps the candidate of the same party in a race like this. Right. And I also think that the case against Trump that Obama will make is a case that he has made even before Trump's candidacy existed.
He's not a guy who generally, although he's extraordinarily good as a campaigner,
right?
He's a great campaigner, great candidate, but he did not love being a candidate and campaigner. In fact, he likes governing better than he likes campaigning. You agree with that, right?
I think so, but with the exception that he really likes making the case. He likes being out on the stump and telling a story and making a case.
Right, so you think he's not only going to be an asset and be a real asset for her, but actually enjoy doing this? This is like something he's got the bit between his teeth to go out there and do this?
I think he's been itching to do it because I think this also sort of acts as a cap on his 8 years in office. And he, you know, like, he's going to give a farewell address at some point, but at that point, there'll already be a president and there'll be a transition. And these next 6 or 7 months between now and November is going to be his chance to both make the case for Hillary and his own presidency and the vision that he spoke about, you know, since he's been on the stage in 2004.
Now is the time on With All Due Respect where I court Twitter hate. What is Donald Trump's campaign slogan?
Make America Great Again.
What is Hillary Clinton's?
Stronger Together.
Stronger Together. So that's relatively new.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
I think it's good. Look, I think people put way too much in slogans. Yeah. I think
a lot of people on Twitter will say,
if the Clintons came out with "Make America Great Again" months ago, people would have mocked it. No one thinks that Donald Trump is where he is because of his slogan. I think the change we can believe in. I think hope and change. I think all this stuff is way overrated, and what's much more important is the case that you make.
So there's a debate going on now about whether she should be spending as much time as she started to going after Donald Trump, whether she should be spending more time building herself up. Obviously, it's a false choice because you're going to do both. But should the balance, in your view, be a little bit more towards talking more about her positive message? Because if she goes out and hits Trump like she did today, no positive message is going to get through, and the campaign must know that.
So I think it's a timing issue. I think this period between now and the convention, I mean, we did the same thing in 2012 with Romney. Obama spent those months before the convention really making the negative case against Romney's stick. We talked about Bain, we talked about all the negative stuff. And I think she will probably do that between now and the convention, and then the convention will be the time where she starts making the positive case for herself. She has to do both.
This is the Doug Sosnick, Democratic strategist view of races, which is they're basically decided before the conventions and everything else is falling action. Do you think that the Clinton campaign is geared up with their research, target-rich environment from their point of view to put Donald Trump away before the conventions effectively?
I don't know if they can put him away, but I think they'll certainly unload quite a bit of the oppo between now and then.
But just to finish up, by the time you guys got to the conventions against Mitt Romney, there wasn't a single person in the Obama campaign who thought you'd lose, right? Every day, people brought in the data and said, we're going to win. Do you think the Clinton campaign could be in that position, or this is a different race?
It all depends on what happens after the primary is over. We're in such that weird period right now where if the primary ends and she starts getting 70–80% of Sanders supporters, then I think they'll be in that position.
Okay,
for sure.
so I know one thing. You don't think slogans matter that much, but I know you think big speeches matter a lot, and that President Obama gave a couple of really important ones in his rise that kind of defined him as a politician, right? Most Democrats I know think that the convention speech for Hillary Clinton is going to matter a lot.
I think
because she's got various problems that she's got to try to remedy in terms of how people see her. She's got a chance to introduce herself in a way she really, even though she's incredibly well known, this is going to be a big moment, speech of her life in some ways, right?
Yeah.
So if she called you and said, you know, you've written some pretty big speech for President Obama, help me think through how to approach this speech. Not write it for me, but how should I approach this speech? What would you tell her?
I think she needs to think first and foremost about what is her vision for the country, and how do you talk about that in a way that it is an implicit contrast with Donald Trump's vision, right? So every time, you can't just make a positive case and say, here's my laundry list of 10 policies, and by the way, that guy sucks, right? The actual speech that you're making, the case that you're making has to be both why you're the one to lead the country and why he isn't, right? And you have to do both of those things at the same time. I think you're going to need to have some bio in there, like you said. I think she's going to need to reintroduce herself to the country, and I think she's going to need to talk both about the accomplishments of the last 8 years and how to build on those accomplishments. What's the unfinished work of the Obama presidency?
Have you heard her give a speech that suggests to you that she has oratorical greatness within her?
I think that the speech that she gave in the 2008 convention to nominate Obama was actually one of her. I mean, I think she stepped up on the national stage at conventions and done some really great speeches.
And she's had some set pieces in this campaign that have been quite good. They haven't gotten tons of attention, but she's done some on race, on criminal justice that have been quite good.
Yeah, when she gets into a policy topic, she does quite well, actually.
Looking as an observer from 3,000 miles away for the Trump campaign, what are they doing well now?
What is the Trump campaign doing well? I mean, they've had a rough couple of weeks. Look, I think when they focus on, if Donald Trump was disciplined and focused only on, I represent change and she doesn't, I think they'd be doing okay.
So there's nothing they're doing on a tactical or strategic level right now that you think's any good?
I just think his lack of discipline is sort of overpowering any other kind of message that they have, right? I mean, when there are bad things in the news, right? Yesterday, the Trump University stuff started to come out, and he was able to get that out of the news by going crazy on a bunch of reporters at a press conference. So if you call that a win, I guess that's a win, but I don't.
Who's the smartest person she could pick as her running mate?
It's a good question.
The clock is ticking. Put 10 seconds on the clock.
I think Elizabeth Warren would be a
other than Tommy Vietor.
Elizabeth Warren would be a great candidate.
I think Elizabeth Warren. I think Sherrod Brown. I think Tom Perez. I think those are all great candidates.
And why? What's the case for Elizabeth Warren?
I think she can take on Donald Trump. Right. She makes a positive case for a fairer economy in a really sharp, smart way. Right. And I think someone who can do that is going to be a added value. I think Sherrod Brown does that. I think Tom Perez does that as well.
And maybe solves a little bit of the Sanders problem for her?
I think that's part of what she'll be looking for. At least I would.
All right. Jon Favreau.
Thanks, guys.
It's really good to see you.
You too.
Especially in the flesh, right here. When we come back, we'll talk to two journalists, Christina Bellantoni and Bill Rucker. One from the Los Angeles Times, another from the Washington Post. And if you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can listen to us equally well on the radio on 99.1 FM. We'll be right back. Got questions about who's going to win here in California? Or what Hillary Clinton will say in her foreign policy speech? Or what the mascot is for Trump University? Here to maybe help us answer those questions and more is the LA Times Assistant Managing Editor for Politics, Christina Bellantoni. And also in Washington, D.C., we're joined by the Washington Post's great, magnificent national political correspondent, Phil Rucker. Christina, we're always happy to be out here in your state. My home state, state we love to visit. What is going on here in this Democratic race? Just give us the state of play.
Yeah, so the state of play is all over the place. And the biggest question is which voters decide to show up on Tuesday. So in Los Angeles County alone, for example, we've had 235,000 new registrants just this year. And 61% of those people are under the age of 20. So you hear that statistic and you think that's a bunch of young people that are going to go vote for Senator Sanders. Yeah. But you don't know that they're actually going to show up. And in California, it's even more complicated in that we allow independents to vote in the Democratic presidential primary, but they have to ask for a Democratic presidential ballot, and sometimes that's complicated. So we have polls all over the place. We have one that's coming out on Friday that I can't give any exclusive details out yet, but essentially these polls are all over the map. And we're seeing that if a lot of independent voters show up for Sanders, he could win California. It's entirely possible.
Phil, you wrote, you've been writing a lot about a lot of different things, but you wrote a piece the other day about Hillary Clinton and her challenge here in California. Why don't you just explain what the thesis of that story is, and we can talk about it a little more.
Yeah, so I saw her on the trail last week in California, and she's trying to talk about how she would bring change. She would bring a lot of changes to policy matters. She would be the first woman president, but she's really struggling to convince voters that she would be the kind of change agent that they want in Washington. And that's one of her vulnerabilities in a general election with Donald Trump, who obviously would change things more than many voters would even want. But she's trying to figure out how to become that kind of credible change agent in voters' minds.
Phil, what kinds of things is she doing, is the campaign doing, to get at least a piece of the change account?
Well, they're doing some subtle things, like they're talking a lot about the way she would change certain policies. They talk about certain labor laws. Paid leave is one example, one really popular issue out there. But she's also talking about how she would bring a new kind of thinking to the White House. Her surrogates talk a lot about her as the first woman president, and that's something that motivates a lot of women voters. But the polling, you know, she outperforms Donald Trump on so many measures, from temperament to experience to judgment to issues, but it's that issue of change where Trump beats her, and that could be an Achilles heel if Trump were to maximize it to his benefit, which he has not yet been able to do.
Christina, if you look at what the presidential candidates are talking about, they've got a spirited Democratic Senate nomination fight as well. What issues seem to matter to California Democrats this year?
Yeah, we've seen the economy still be a major issue. We raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour over the next several years here, and actually voters really like that. They are starting to feel a little bit more optimistic about the economy here. But climate is a huge issue, and Donald Trump's speech last week, where he talked about more drilling and not really wanting to invest in clean energy, really resonated here in California, and a lot of people are saying they don't like that. That's not the message that they want to hear from a Republican. Our Republicans here are more moderate, tend to side with Governor Jerry Brown on these types of issues.
You mentioned Governor Brown. I want to ask you about that in a second, but it looks like you say this. We don't really know what's going on here. It's tough to tell. Looks like the race is pretty close, though, if you just judge by what the campaigns are doing, how they're spending money, spending their time. Right. So two people I'll mention, and whether you think they matter to Hillary Clinton's fortunes here. The first is Governor Brown, who just endorsed her. Helps or neutral? I
think it helps a lot, in part because he's pretty liberal, and he really is along Sanders' mentality on a lot of things, and he even said so much in his open letter to Democrats. He's very popular right now. Even Republicans like him, and in fact, a lot of Trump voters like him, we found in our last poll that we did in late March.
And the second name I'm going to say is Bill Clinton, who Hillary Clinton's going to has come out here like 5 days.
Yeah, I think it helps in volume, right? Whenever you can have two different people campaigning in opposite parts of the state, it's a big state. He's going to, hit one part while she's in the other. They're going to crisscross. It doesn't hurt. He doesn't have as much of the glow that he did in 2008 at the beginning, but it doesn't hurt at all. And they are getting crowds, just not Sanders side's crowds.
Phil, this question that looms, and both campaigns talk about it, regardless of the outcome in California, what Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton do day to day from next Wednesday forward. What's your sense of that for both Sanders and Clinton, or does it depend on the outcome of the California primary?
I think it depends a little bit on the outcome of the California primary, but Sanders is going to have to go home and decide what he wants to do. Does he concede defeat? I think by then we're going to have Hillary Clinton as effectively the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party, or does he wage a fight all the way to the convention in Philadelphia? I think Hillary Clinton wants to be able to pivot 100% towards Donald Trump and talk about the general election, work to unite all of the Democrats, all of the independents behind her. But she's not going to be able to do that very effectively or easily or quickly if Senator Sanders is still standing in her way. And so I think a lot of the onus is on Sanders to decide how gracefully, if you will, he'll exit the stage.
Compare this to 2008. You and I were on that plane together after Barack Obama clinched the nomination. It was the last contest, and he and Hillary Clinton did not speak for about 24 hours, and then they finally had that secret meeting at Dianne Feinstein's house. It took them just a couple of days to start to unify. Now, the numbers were different there, obviously, but all of the superdelegates are likely going to take a look at what happens in California. If she has some big loss here, that could really put a pause on things and make people say, hey, let's hold off for a little bit. If she ends up pulling it out, then people are going to say, okay, she's the nominee. We're going to rally behind her and stop Donald Trump.
What has Senator Sanders had in this state working with him? He's had some pretty potent surrogates, but
a lot of Hollywood stars. His top endorser of the political establishment is a former LA City Council member. She has every single member of Congress that has taken a position. There are only 3 Democrats who haven't. One of them is Nancy Pelosi, who's staying neutral. The other 2 are pretty liberal Democrats who are just staying out of it. They're not even out there for him, Barbara Lee being one of them. So, surrogates aren't everything, but they don't hurt. And for her, they know where to win. They know which neighborhoods to go into, and they're out there organizing offices for her, making sure the coalitions show up. So it's all about do the Democrats show up, or does everybody show up?
You got to say, of a campaign filled with extraordinary achievements, the fact that he is fighting a Clinton in this 1/7 of the people live in this state, head-to-head, toe-to-toe, in a very tough situation, quite an achievement, no matter win or lose for him.
Absolutely. And the places he's going, I should point out, he's going to places that have never seen a presidential campaign. Salinas, all over the place.
Right, place where there aren't even television stations. Christina Bellantoni, Phil Rucker, thank you both for being with us here today. When we come back, you'll have to pardon our French after this.
By the end of today, David French may well be a household name in America. Of course, it depends on which household you're talking about, maybe in the Bill Kristol household. But because Mr. French has been talked about all day on the news and every forum as a possible independent presidential candidate, we decided to dig into the archives to find out a little bit more about this writer, lawyer, and possible future president of the United States.
David French, the pride of Tennessee.
Do you have Kenny Chesney beat Best Body in Nashville?
I'm not going to.
We'll ask Nancy.
With a wife who supported his decision at 37 to join the military.
I said, you know, I think I need to join the Army and go to Iraq. And she said, but you're old.
So he joined up.
So I felt the conviction that I couldn't keep supporting a war I wasn't willing to fight myself.
Back home, he joined the political fray. As a lawyer,
David French is an attorney who represents groups targeted by the IRS.
This was not just one person. This was a systematic problem.
And as a writer for National Review.
I'm far more hateful than Pamela Geller. In fact, I'd argue there's no way that she could hate jihad more than I do.
Americans answer bad speech with better speech.
He went where others wouldn't.
David, first of all, let me say thank you for having the guts to be here. To be completely honest, we reached out to some Republican state legislators, and they would not come here to defend the flag.
I don't have any affection for that flag. What I want to do is to be able to teach history.
And he isn't new to the battle against Trump.
Not once in the last 20-plus years that we've been fighting for conservative values that we looked around and said, wow, thank God Donald Trump is with us.
David French. Beard, no beard, game changer of the week.
So he's pretty good presence on television, not overwhelming, but you see there in the issues that he's dealt with why a lot of conservatives are attracted to not just his resume, but kind of the posture he has towards conservatism. It fits with the heart of the anti-Trump movement, the never-Trump movement amongst intellectuals.
He is appealing to some conservative intellectuals because he is like them. He is a conservative intellectual who's done some things that some of them haven't done, like having been in the military. Again, you know, I mean, again, you can't say enough about how this guy seems like a perfectly admirable human being. But you also can't say enough, I think, at this point, to suggest that he is just much too obscure and maybe a little bit too small. I mean, just in the not in characterologically, but in terms of his ability to fill a screen, to be the kind of person who could stand toe-to-toe with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, you know, by settling on him, it certainly has, at least for a time, ended the discussion of recruiting a bigger name into this. And
well, because I think it feels for a lot of people like if they could have gotten a bigger name, they would have gotten one, and this was not a last resort, but not off the top shelf.
So if he ends up not running, or if he ends up running but really not being a serious person, he may get some small number of symbolic votes, but it is going to put a lot of people in a tough position about whether or not they vote for Donald Trump if they're Republicans, or whether they sit out the election, or in some cases vote for Hillary Clinton.
Well, I think we're getting pretty fast to the point, though, where I think that there are, for Republicans who were going to capitulate, which has been a lot, who've said they were anti-Trump, and now they've decided that they're going to do it because Hillary Clinton's too great a threat. I think we're almost to the point where all those people have now made that move, and the people who are left are those who are really choosing between voting for Hillary Clinton, holding their nose, and abstaining. I imagine a lot of those Republicans will end up abstaining rather than voting for Hillary Clinton.
No, there's some members of Congress I think will still be for Trump. All right, when we come back, a super group with a super new political message after this.
Big part of the reason we are out here in LA is because there is a new super group in town. 3 of the members of Rage Against the Machine, led by Tom Morello, Chuck D of Public Enemy, Be Real of Cypress Hill, they have come together to start, as I said, a new supergroup, and it's called Prophets of Rage. Last night, they had their debut at the Whiskey. We were out there listening to the show and talking to them about what they plan to do going forward, especially this summer at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. They're going to disrupt that place. They're going to break up that joint, they say. We talked to them last night, as I said, and we have an exclusive first look at Prophets of Rage and their message.
Martin Luther King famously said, there's no hotter place in hell than for people who remain neutral in times of moral conflict. This is a time of moral conflict. And so we are escaping the hot pit of hell by bringing some rock and roll hip-hop fury.
will show you that entire piece tomorrow on this show. But in the meantime, go to BloombergPolitics.com to read what Donald Trump is telling big donors behind closed doors about the future of Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan. Coming up on Bloomberg West, it's Facebook's VP of Global Marketing Solutions. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow from us, sayonara.